"You're still wearing the white dress, right?" Her voice came through the phone early that morning, soft but heavy, like she was holding something fragile. It was James's grandmother. Clara waited a moment before answering. "Yes," she said quietly. "Today's still my wedding day." It was the only thing she hadn't changed even after James was gone. James Beck, 28 years old, a volunteer firefighter in Crescent Hollow, died 8 months earlier during a night shift. He was on his way to a fire when another fire truck driven by a rookie who had been drinking slammed into his. James was killed instantly. The call came at 1:17 a.m. The last text James sent said, "Be home soon. Don't fall asleep on me." Today was supposed to be their wedding day. The dress had been fitted. The photos were booked. Even the small backyard reception at St. Francis Church was already planned. After the funeral, people gently suggested she cancel everything, pack up the dress, try to move on. But James's grandmother had only asked one question. "You're still wearing the white dress, right?" Clara didn't answer her then. But that morning, she woke up early, put on the dress, did her makeup, clipped a small bouquet of purple flowers into her hand. She didn't cry. Instead of walking into the church, she walked to the cemetery just beyond the hill. No ring, no pastor, no music, just Clara, a white dress, and the grave that still smelled of fresh earth. She placed James's helmet next to his photo, folded his uniform, set his boots beside the stone. Then she sat down, looked at the name etched into granite, and whispered, "I do." There were no photographers, no guests, no applause. But people who passed by that morning slowed their steps. Even without a groom, they could tell this was a real wedding, the kind where only one person is left to keep the vow. Clara didn't go home right after the wedding. She stayed on the wooden bench by the grave until the sun passed overhead. Around her life went on birds, chirped leaves rustled in the wind, a kid rode past on a bike. But for Clara, time had paused. It stayed there in that one moment when she whispered, "I do," to someone who would never answer back. James hadn't been perfect. He hated doing dishes, ate popcorn for breakfast, and always forgot his wallet. But he never forgot to call her. And every time he came home late, he brought something, a wildflower, a warm muffin, or just the kind of hug that said, "I'm still yours." They met at a used bookstore near the town square. James didn't have enough change to buy a novel and had asked if she wanted to split it. She said no. 2 days later, he came back with a copy of the same book and handed it to her with a note inside, "Only if you haven't finished it yet." That's how it started. When James proposed, he didn't plan anything fancy. He just stood under her window with a ring in one hand and his firefighter helmet in the other, grinning like a boy. "I can't promise I'll live forever," he'd said, "but I promise you'll never feel alone." Clara remembered those words. She just never imagined she'd be the one still holding on. After the funeral, the visitors stopped coming. People said time would heal her and that she needed to keep living. She didn't blame them. Everyone had their own lives. But Clara had never believed love was just a phase. To her, it was a home. And if James was no longer here, she'd still live inside that home quietly. Their wedding had no guests. That was her choice. Not because she was alone, but because she didn't want the day turned into something pitiful. She wanted it to stay a promise, just between the two of them. That afternoon, she unwrapped her bouquet and laid each flower gently across James's grave. Then she stood, brushed the dust from her dress, and touched the stone. "I'll fix the garden tomorrow," she whispered. "You always hated the tall weeds." She didn't say anything else, just walked away slow and steady, carrying the white dress now stained with dirt. No one clapped. No one tossed flowers. But a breeze slipped through the trees like a voice. And in that moment, Clara smiled. 1 week after the quiet wedding by James's grave, Clara began sorting through the storage room. She had cleaned James's firefighter uniform and hung it neatly in the hallway closet. She didn't plan to keep everything forever, but she also couldn't lock it all away like none of it had ever happened. That day, a soft rain tapped on the windows. Clara closed the curtains and sat down to fold what was left. His boots, his helmet, his wristwatch, a couple of pocket notebooks he always kept in the truck. When she folded the heavy navy jacket, the one he wore on every shift, something fell out of the inside pocket. A letter, The paper had yellowed slightly, the edges worn. It looked like James had written it long ago, then never sent it. Or maybe he left it there on purpose. Her name was written on the front, nothing else, Clara. She opened it with both hands, fingers trembling. The handwriting was his clumsy warm and achingly familiar, the kind that never rushed. My dearest Clara, I don't know when you'll read this. Maybe tomorrow, maybe after the wedding, maybe when I'm no longer around. Doing the work I do, sometimes I think about that possibility, not because I'm scared, but because I don't want to leave without saying what I should have said. If there ever comes a day when I don't come home, I want you to remember one thing: I loved you with everything I had. And if there's a next life, I'll look for you again. No matter how long it takes, I'll find you, because you are home. I don't need you to live in grief. I want you to live fully, wildly, brightly with your whole heart. Don't shut the world out because of me. But if you choose to stay, if you choose to keep loving me, I'll know, and I'll be grateful. Always yours, James. Clara placed the letter to her chest and leaned against the wall. This time she didn't hold back the tears. Only then did she truly understand why she had gone through with the wedding, why she still said, I do. It wasn't about clinging to someone who was gone. It was about finishing something they had begun together. The letter didn't take the pain away, but it made the love feel less lonely. That afternoon, Clara went back to the cemetery. No dress, no flowers, just the letter and a single wild daisy she'd picked from the yard. She laid the envelope beneath the headstone. The wind stirred softly through the trees, almost like someone was reading it with her. After she read the letter, Clara didn't return to the cemetery for weeks. Not because the grief had faded, but because she had started building something James would be proud of. Crescent Hollow had a small fire station, the same one where James had volunteered for 6 years. After his death, they framed his photo, laid a bouquet beneath the memorial plaque, and quietly got back to work. No one did anything wrong, but no one did much else either. One July afternoon, Clara walked into the station with a folded proposal in her hand. I don't want James to be remembered just for how he died, she told the fire chief. I want the kids in this town to know how he lived. Her idea was simple: start a community event called Keeper of the Flame Day, a day when elementary school students could visit the firehouse, learn about service, about quiet courage, and about the kind of person James was. She didn't ask for money, just time, just space to tell the story right. At first, no one thought it would happen, but then one school said yes, then another. By the end of the year, Keeper of the Flame became an official annual event in Crescent Hollow, always held during the last week of June, the week of their would-have-been anniversary. It wasn't a grand celebration, just a few folding chairs, simple games, and a photo of James beside his helmet cleaned and polished. But the children began to know his name. They knew he'd given everything to protect people he didn't even know. And they learned something else, too, that love doesn't always end. Not when someone chooses to carry it forward. On the 3rd year of the event, a little girl, maybe 7 years old, tugged Clara's sleeve and asked, "Were you his girlfriend?" Clara smiled. "Yes." "Is he coming back?" Clara knelt, straightened the girl's toy firefighter helmet, and replied, "He doesn't need to. You're already carrying his dream forward." The girl nodded like she understood. And in that moment, maybe she did. The next day, Clara returned to the cemetery. She didn't speak much, just stood there for a while, then gently laid down a folder filled with the children's drawings. On the front, in crooked crayon letters, one message stood out. "I want to be a good person like Mr. James." She stood in silence. A breeze passed through the trees, lifting the corner of one page. The sunlight fell softly on the stone. Real love doesn't need an ending. Sometimes it lives on in the people still carrying the light.